Hey everybody, Anna Sabramowicz here. Welcome to this episode. Thanks for visiting my channel. Now, today is going to be awesome. We're going to be doing a walkthrough of one of my favorite interactive stories, Connect with HAJI KAMAL. Now, one of the things I wanted to offer you as a bonus at the end of this video is how you could get your hands on a blueprint of this actual interactive story. The blueprint not only shows you the decisions that were made throughout the actual experience, but also the visuals. And so what I think this is a really great asset for people who are wanting to design maybe their first branched interactive story, but don't know where to get started. This is a great model, and it will help you actually see the mechanics underneath at a bigger picture and hopefully inspire you to do your own. Now, the thing with interactive stories, when I do my walkthroughs, one of the things is I always focus on three major areas. So the major area is going to be definitely storytelling, the learning outcome, because each of our interactive stories is meant to get a learner to change their behavior in some way. So that's what we're going to be looking at, because that goal also affects the mechanics that we're going to use in our story. And so without further ado, let's talk about that. Okay, so Connect with HAJI KAMAL was created by Connection Studios. That was with Doug Nelson. And so what they did is they crafted this interactive story for the US Army. And you may have heard about this story from Kathy Moore. She is focused on the scenarios in this story, and she actually was one of the writers in this experience, which is really cool. So what is the context of this specific story? I wanted to give you some of that context because it will affect how it's structured and what its intent is, and therefore what I want you to think about is how you're going to maybe leverage this kind of experience, but realize that the context that it is applied in may change for you, and so you might be able to do something else that is the same framework but has a little bit of different mechanics or elements. So this particular experience was created for people to actually experience before they came to a live classroom and debriefed and talked about what happened in the story, which is, I think, is an amazing way to use interactive stories, which is that if you have a room full of experienced adults, you can't necessarily predict that all of them have had the same life experiences and that they'll start any conversation or discussion about a situation on the same ground. So now what you're doing with something like Connect with HAJI KAMAL is you're giving them a common experience from which they can start talking to, and everybody is now, when you're troubleshooting, has this common ground that they can begin talking from, which is really cool. I think it's a fantastic way to use interactive stories as conversation starters. So this is the thing. Everybody starts off, this is their homework, begins working on this, and then they come to the group to debrief and talk about the experience that they had and the outcome that they received. So let's get right into it. Okay, so Connect with HAJI KAMAL. This is the splash page based on a real event. Takes about 10 minutes, 12 paths through the game with 2 ways to win. I love this. There is this kind of gravity that's added to this because it says based on a real event. It's very considerate of the learner because it says it takes about 10 minutes, which lets me know how long I should invest, which is amazing. And then it tells me 12 paths through the game, 2 ways to win. So there's a little bit of that competitive thing. Can I get, there's 12 paths, but only 2 ways to win, which kind of sets up this curiosity of, for me, can I do it right the first time? Now, here's a bit of that storytelling. Your lieutenant is young, he's new, he's about to screw up unless you give him good advice. So right off the bat, we're thrown into a situation. What I really like about this is that you realize that your role in this is very important. He's about to screw up unless you give him good advice. Phenomenal. Let's start this. So now we get introduced to the characters. So here's the lieutenant. Lieutenant Justin Harrell. Where he's born, just a little bit about him. Time and country, 2 months, sees himself as defender of what's right, listens to you most of the time. And then we're talking to Haji Masood Kamal, and his role as the influential leader, his tribe is Pashtun, his home is in Helmand, affiliation recently stopped supporting the insurgents. Cool. You and Lieutenant Harrell are going to Haji Kamal's home to meet him for the first time. With you are two of your squad leaders, Sergeant Manuel Ramos and Sergeant Kenneth Butler, and we learn a little bit about them. So there's their experience, has studied Pashto and Islam, experience extensive contact with Afghanis. So boom, you're thrown right into the situation. You get to meet all the players, very brief. And then here we go, your goal. Help Lieutenant Harrell make a good first impression on Haji Kamal. You want to build a long-term relationship with the Haji so he'll help you accomplish your mission. Now this is what I think is very important for us to understand here. We're not told how to do this. We don't say use cultural effective strategy, use the 3-point method to make a good first impression on Haji Kamal. Like really, I don't necessarily know what that would mean, right? And I think most people would come in with assumptions of what does that mean to make a good first impression? And then there's my goal. You want to build a long-term relationship with the Haji so he'll help you accomplish your mission. One of the things you're also doing here is you're taking away the academic spin on learning outcomes, and what you're doing is, because as far as I'm concerned, learning outcomes, when they're written in a very formulaic way, what happens is they're really done for the instructional designer, for the e-learning developer. So that's for you to kind of have a North Star and kind of a guidance post of, am I focusing on the right thing here? Is this correlated with that? But here, what they're doing very strategically is they're connecting the learning outcomes in the background to an actual contextual experience. Because why would you want to have a culturally competent workforce? Well, because you want to maybe be able to build long-term relationships. And this is the context of that actual learning, which is fabulous. So there's the goal. And so we've got that set up, I think 3 clicks. As you approach the Haji's house, you notice something odd next door. A cannabis field. All right, there we go. And now the lieutenant is getting worried, but not about the pot. Okay. All right, here we go. I know Haji Kamal is going to offer me chai, but I hate chai and I'm afraid it'll make me sick. What should I do when he offers it? And then ask your squad leaders for ideas.
He could just say, "No thanks, I'm not thirsty." It's okay to be direct if you do it respectfully, and Haji Kamal will respect him for being honest.
It would be more polite to say he's allergic and can't drink chai. Haji Kamal will know it's a white lie, and that's okay. They do it all the time here.
But that would start the relationship out with a lie. Lieutenant Harrell would have to keep it up for his whole deployment.
But he shouldn't just say no. He would offend the Haji from the get-go when we're here to build rapport.
Okay, so basically what we're doing now is there's a situation, this is like a major beat, and what happens is now we're getting advice from these 2 senior people that have experience in different areas, and now we're faced with a situation. Welcome, please let me pour you some chai. Here he is, oh my gosh, thinking about this. What do you recommend that Lieutenant Harrell say? No thanks, I'm not thirsty. I wish I could drink chai, but unfortunately I'm allergic to it. Thank you, I'd like some chai. So there's a bunch of things going on here that I want to go through, and I'm going to go through them very systematically as we go through each scene. So first off, as you notice, this is very much a comic book layout. It's like a graphic novel, right? And as we go through, you'll see this pattern is repeated in every single interaction. So let's go to the next screen, I'll show you. So I'm going to choose, thank you, I'd like some chai. Haji Kamal smiles and pours a cup of chai, and then. So what happens is I make a decision, and then this unfolds for me. And this is the consequence of my decision. There is no check mark. There's no +1, there's no feedback. There really is just, the feedback is what would happen in the real world, which is, I see it, he reacts. And I'm supposed to, especially in this kind of training when we're talking about cultural communication, I'm supposed to read that. Now, sometimes a smile is not a good thing. So I have to figure out, I guess as I'm going through, there's this ambiguity, which is fantastic, that I have to figure out if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But either way, this is how real life works. You're figuring things out as you go, which is a great way for people to actually learn and think about what they're doing. So here we go. I'm going to move forward. Lieutenant Harold and Haji Kamal make small talk about the weather and a recent festival. After about 5 minutes of this, there's an opening in the conversation. Lieutenant Harold looks lost.
The lieutenant should keep the small talk going and compliment Haji Kamal's livestock or crops. He could say something like, that cannabis field looks very well tended.
We shouldn't bring up the cannabis. We should say something more general like, those hills are beautiful. Compliment his country, not his pot.
But bringing up the pot could open the door to talking about how he could grow other crops. Remember, he's just switched allegiance from the insurgents.
The hills are a safer topic, and do we even need more small talk? What if we just get down to business?
Here we go. So as you see, the layout is the same. We have a situation, then we have these two characters give us advice, give Lieutenant Harold advice, and then he's sitting there waiting, what do you recommend that Lieutenant Harold say? These two characters here, I call them contagonist distractors. Basically what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to add depth and a certain kind of difficulty to the decisions and what I'm going to say. They add some context as to why, reasons that you would choose a certain decision. Now, I know that for a fact these conversations were actually recordings of, they were directly pulled from the subject matter experts who were talking through the rationalizations of why somebody would make this decision versus another. And when you think about it, basically what these two characters are doing is they're saying what maybe Lieutenant Harold might be thinking, and they're basically giving him a decision on which voice he's going to follow. What you also want to take into consideration here is that it isn't like one of them is always right and one of them is always wrong. What's happening here is that both of them are sometimes right and both of them are sometimes wrong. And so as you're working through this, you're meant to think through what they're saying and see which one of these answers or one of these actions resonates most closely with how you'd like to help Lieutenant Harold address the situation. So, what do you recommend that Lieutenant Harold say? I'd say that cannabis field looks very well tended. Haji Kamal looks nervous. That field belongs to a man in the capital.
Haji Kamal just volunteered some information. We should see if we can get more.
But I think he's getting nervous.
We don't have to pump him. Just say something like, someone local must farm it.
I think we should back off and give him more praise, like, the farmer is obviously very skilled.
So, as you see, what's happening here is we've got the same layout, the same images, very much this face. You've seen it over and over again. And that's one of the things you'll find when you walk through the blueprint as well, is because you're able to see things at the big picture view. One of the things that happens is you realize how much Connection Studios worked to bring the scope of certain things down. And that only happens when you realize that once the framework has been established, you're finding more elegant ways to make projects like this absolutely scalable, right? And so what you're going to do is you're going to find things that are going to make your images scale better, and that you'll be able to reuse them, because people don't care. They actually just care about, are the situations provocative? Are they challenging enough that they're actually making me think? And then the other thing is, when you have a really solid framework for designing these kinds of experiences, well, then you want to make it easier for yourself to produce, 3 of them a month, because really that's the point, is that you're able to now no longer think about the framework itself, but all you care about now is making sure that the context, the language is tight, and that it actually is very meaningful to the people who you're designing this for, that the challenges, the actual decisions are very provocative. Now, the other thing you want to think about here is that obviously Doug is a gaming fan, and one of the things you want to do, especially when you're designing interfaces like this, is that the decisions are consistent. And here, and if you look at something like Broken Coworker as well, Broken Coworker was heavily influenced as well by this design. It's an inspiration for us. We modeled it. And one of the things you'll find here is that all the decisions have to do with narrative, like conversation. What are we going to say? What is he going to say? So we don't have him leave. We don't have him do this. Everything is related to conversation. Broken Coworker is exactly the same way. And it actually is absolutely intuitive, because when you're doing cultural competence, as what this is, and negotiation with people, you do that through conversation. And so what we're going to focus on here is how are you going to drive that conversation forward in order to establish an allegiance. So hope that's fun. Now, what do you recommend that Lieutenant Harrell say? Some local farm must have it. The farmer is obviously very skilled. Let's click on that one. Uh-oh, the lieutenant has his own idea. That type of crop can bring trouble. Uh-oh. So one of the things that was done here is, apparently when you're dealing with people and advising them in a situation, especially in these negotiation situations, sometimes they won't listen to you. They'll do their own thing. And Lieutenant Harrell at this point has decided that he's going to say his own thing and do his own thing. Haji Kamal looks uncomfortable. There are few ways left to support one's family. I'm sure the farmer would prefer to grow grapes, but grapes don't make a profit anymore.
Damage control. Haji Kamal is getting defensive.
The lieutenant should say something reassuring, like, yeah, it's hard to support his family. We'd like to help you.
But does he want help? Let's build a connection through family. The lieutenant has a baby, so he could say, yeah, it's hard to support a family. I have a daughter myself. Do you have kids?
More small talk? I think it's time to get to business, but without the pot.
Okay. So here we go. Like I said, look at these images. Reused, great filters. What do you recommend that the Lieutenant Harrell say? Yes, it's hard to support a family. We'd like to help you. Yes, it's hard to support a family. I have a daughter myself. Do you have children? We wanted to build your economy so you can grow any crop you want. I'm going to go with, it's hard to support a family. I have a daughter myself. Haji Kamal relaxes and talks about his kids. After 20 more minutes of small talk, Lieutenant Harrell wants to guide the conversation towards his goal of getting help from Haji Kamal, but he's not sure what to say next.
The lieutenant should say, there are lots of problems here. I'd like to help you. It shows that he cares.
First, he should make clear that he respects Haji Kamal. He could say, I'm honored to be a guest in your country.
I don't see how that would get us anywhere.
It reminds Haji Kamal that he's a host, and hosts are supposed to be helpful. It's a natural way to get him to offer his help.
But we're not guests, we're foreign invaders. We can't expect him to help us without offering him some help first.
Very compelling dialogue, right? And that only happens if you really source people who are living in that reality and actually extract from them the situations where, and the ideas and the bias and the thinking that would happen when you're making these decisions. That's why it's so important when you're crafting interactive stories that you actually talk to people who are in the field and also remember what it was like to be struggling with these kinds of decisions themselves. Now, the other thing I'd like you to consider, this is very important here, because one of the things that happens with this kind of experience is that if you're going through this, there's, as you see, there is no feedback. You're actually going through this, and I don't even know if I'm making positive progress with Haji. I mean, I really don't know. There's been some pluses, but also some minuses. And it seems like every single decision that I hit is very difficult. And so what is fantastic here is that that ambiguity, that confusion is actually a part of the learning outcome here. The goal of any interactive story, most of them in fact, what happens is you're supposed to get people into a situation that not only challenges them, but also reveals their gaps. Because the goal of those interactive stories is to get people to feel motivated to actually learn more about that. And if people feel already confident that they know what they're doing and they don't need to learn anything new, and that this is a waste of time for them because they're not going to learn anything new, then what happens is it's a missed opportunity. They're not going to actually want to learn. If you said, oh, here's a 10-point checklist on how to navigate difficult conversations, they're not really going to be interested in looking at that if they're not sold on the idea that they actually have some gaps, or that there's different ways to actually look at these situations and solve them. And so what this kind of experience does is it piques their curiosity, for sure. It contextualizes some of the information that they're going to learn later. It also helps them identify some of the gaps because they're unsure of themselves. Like, you could really see when you're making these decisions, how confident are you that that's actually the right answer? And some of these, I'm sure, as I'm going through this, some of you were like, I would have chosen something completely different. But this is how ambiguous these need to be sometimes for you to actually achieve that kind of curiosity and the kind of outcome that you want from your learners. And in this case, it was so that people come into those live sessions going, man, that was like, I felt like I was making all the right decisions, but this happened. And actually discussing amongst each other of what should have been the best approach and how the things should have been different. And that's fantastic. Anytime you have people experience your interactive story and they walk away with questions, discussions, critique, feedback, anything, it's fantastic. Because how many times have you had that happen with click through next PowerPoint? Most people just yawn. This is, if you had them engaged and they're actually maybe disagreeable with it, or it upsets them because it wasn't the way it should have been, that's fantastic. That means they actually thought about it, it resonated with them, and then you talk about that. And that is, I think, one of the best ways to use these kinds of experiences, is to spur even more conversation and discussion. All right, there are many problems here. I'd like to help you. I'm honored to be a guest in your country. It's unfortunate that honorable men must produce drugs like that cannabis. We'd like to change that. I'm honored to be a guest in your country. Let's see. Why should I say that? Ooh, explain why Lieutenant Harold should say, I'm honored to be a guest in your country. It shows that you respect Haji Kamal's role as a host and reassures him that we aren't here to take over. It reminds Haji Kamal that this is his land and that his people will continue to suffer if he doesn't support change. I'd say no. I'm guessing. Haji Kamal smiles warmly. You're far from home. May I ask why you've come to my country?
Lieutenant Harold should say he's here to help the local people enjoy democracy and freedom. It shows that we care and suggests that Haji Kamal could get more influence.
But they don't really want our kind of democracy. Lieutenant Harold should say something stronger, like we're here because we have blood vengeance against Al-Qaeda.
And it sounds like we're here just for ourselves and don't care about collateral damage.
But blood vengeance is a big deal here. Haji Kamal would respect us for going after it.
Wow. Totally contextual, because I never even considered that blood vengeance would have been a part of the options. But here, this is so contextual, it might actually work. So I'm going to pick that just because I think it's cool. Haji Kamal nods. Okay, I hope that's a good thing. You're right to seek vengeance. My tribe will also fight against all disrespect.
We've got him. Now the lieutenant can nail it by saying, my time here is short, so I'll need your help to make progress.
That puts a deadline on it, and people here have a different sense of time. The lieutenant should say, we have many plans for changes here. Will you help us accomplish them?
But that puts us in the role of fixers instead of respectful visitors. We don't want to sound like we know everything.
But usually we do know what they need, and Haji Kamal will appreciate the fact that we want to get things done.
Ooh, I would like us to fight disrespect together. Will you join me? We have many plans for changes here. Will you help us accomplish them? So yeah, this is coming off kind of like we're going to tell you what to do. My time here is short, so I'll need your help to make progress. I would like us to fight disrespect together. Will you join me? It's interesting because if you listen to what they're saying, like once this is one of the main messages, then there's this one that's the other one's message, and then you've got this one, and I'm resonating with this one. I'm going to pick it. Haji Kamal nods. I will be proud to help you. Late success. Later, Haji Kamal helps you significantly and persuades the villagers to help as well. Awesome. Okay, so I made it to the 2 paths that were actually successful. Totally, I've played this many times, but this is what's cool. It encourages you to play again. Very compact, but it says right there, play again. So I'm going to click that. Here we go. Now we skip to the part where the first decision is made, so we don't make people, see the setup again because they already know what it is. So this is really cool because it respects the learner's time and it doesn't frustrate them, which is awesome. Now, the other thing that is very neat here, and as you go through this experience and the blueprint that I wanted to share with you, is you'll see that in order to actually create experiences like this that have this kind of branching, what you need to do is be judicious with the branches that you're creating. So what happens is with some of these decisions, they don't all go to different branches. But one of the things that you'll find with Connect with Haji Kamal, and let me just figure this out here for you. Okay, so when you have a decision, in order for this not to just blow itself out of proportion, because there really is no constraints in software, as I always talk about, and also one of the things you're trying to do, and Connection obviously was trying to do, is to control scope, because you don't want to have to write, every time you create a new branch, you realize that you have to keep on adding new dialogue, new continuity. And one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that in the end you are still maintaining kind of a continuity between where you want this story to go and the lesson that you want people to get from it. So one of the things you'll find is in some instances we use what it's called the illusion of choice. So in the illusion of choice, what happens is people think that they do get to go on different branches. But in the illusion of choice, if you get 3 options, 2 of those options still take you to the same thing. And we do that for scope management. And also, sometimes there's just really one consequence. If you say, no thanks, I'm not thirsty, or I wish I could drink chai, but unfortunately I'm allergic, that's just a different way of saying the same thing. Now, here's the important thing. You know you're doing that because you're the designer. You know that's what's happening on the back end. But guess what? The end user, the person playing your interactive story, they never find that out. Unless they play through it like 10 or 15 times, then what happens is they'll be like, I wonder if this actually happens, leads to the same thing. But realistically, they'll never do it unless they go through the interactive experience like 8 or 10 times, which in my opinion would be actually fantastic. And that's one of the things also that happens in Connect with Haji Kamal, because as we saw at the very beginning, there is 12 paths through the game with 2 ways to win, which means that there are 10 ways to fail. And because there are 10 ways to fail, most people end on the not so great or poor endings, which is actually intentional in the design of this interactive experience. And what happens is then they'll go through, and because they're dissatisfied with their outcome, they'll play again. And at every single ending, what happens is you see the outcome of what you achieved with your conversation with Haji Kamal. But then at the end, it also says play again. And a lot of people will go through it, and I remember the first time I went through this interactive experience, I was absolutely confused. I didn't know where I had made the mistake. So I went through it several times, just the first time, just to be like, how do I wanted to win it. And so that was a great experience, because one of the things we want to do, especially with our interactive stories, we're always wondering, if somebody's going to go through it just once, are they going to get the lesson? Are they going to check out the alternate paths? Because there's lessons in those paths. I always build my interactive stories thinking people are just going to go through it maybe just once because that's all they have time for. So I make that first pass always very powerful. But in this case, what happened is there were certain paths that you would take that it would just be impossible for you to recover from that, especially in a conversation. So let's say with HAJI KAMAL, when he first offers you something, in many places when you don't accept that, that's basically a no-no. Nobody's going to invite you back again because you don't accept their hospitality. And so those are certain branches that will take you on just an immediate, basically, fail. And so one of the things that you're thinking about is, how does that fit into my learning outcome, and how does that fit into, then manifest itself into the mechanics of my interactive experience, so that I can actually make that feel real and be the kind of failure that somebody's like, yeah, I can see that making sense, I guess, because I said no twice, and that's kind of rude. So I hope you enjoyed that experience. I thoroughly love going through it, because there's so many elements, from the writing to the storytelling to the beginning, middle, end. We're working through helping this person. There's mechanics that help us have a more immersive experience. And as you saw, the consistency and the visual consistency, it also helps us focus on the most important thing as a player, which is, how do I make a good decision in this context? It takes away all the other distractions of, visuals or sounds. We're just focusing on the most important thing. It's just, how do you make great decisions? So I hope you enjoyed that, and that you're thinking about how you would apply this kind of strategy in your own work. Now, if this is something you really enjoyed and you want to get really good at this, I invite you to jump on a call with me. So on that call, what we'll do is we'll talk about what's been holding you back. What do you need to actually move forward and actually craft your own amazing interactive storytelling experience? The other thing is that I want you to think about that there is a community of people that are doing this every single day. So this is not a one-off for the people who have joined my program. We have tons of these interactive experiences and blueprints to go along with them that show you, basically from this bird's eye view, what these frameworks look like. Because I think that once you start thinking in that way, the intimidation kind of goes away, and then what happens is you can really start focusing on making sure you're making connections with the right subject matter experts, pulling out stories and contextual pieces from them, and then also figuring out ways to make it your own, because the goal is for you to model something that's already proven to work, get feedback on that from people who understand what you're trying to accomplish. And that's obviously something that I do, which is coach people on how to refine their interactive experience. And then also get feedback from other people who are also trying to do this, so that you get more of a depth of that review. Because a lot of times what happens, especially when you're working there's a lot of people who work as a department of one, the only time you get feedback is when you've already launched something, or from people who are like, oh, that's amazing. And you're like, no, do you know what I'm doing? Do you understand my intent? And the feedback that you get is almost either too late, or it's not the kind of quality that you need to truly improve your work and take yourself to the next level. I remember when I watched a presentation by Doug, who was actually doing, who designed this, who was the lead on this. One of the things that he said is, once they establish that framework for these kinds of experiences, he has reused it over and over again. So now he's able to put these things together in like a month for his clients. But the work is really about thinking about this from the kind of like the framework point of view, as far as how are these major decisions going to play out. And then it's the refinement of making this a tight experience, because as you saw, the wording, the language that you're using, the way that you show the consequences, all those things are very strategically done. And that doesn't happen in a single, you don't just sit down and go, I'm just not going to knock this out in one day. That's your first draft. And then what happens is you get feedback, you iterate, and you make it better. And then at a certain point, you've decided this is good enough, we're going to launch. And hopefully by the time you've gotten there, you've gotten feedback and just support to actually make it happen, because these are beautiful creative projects, and sometimes it takes a little bit of accountability and feedback to actually make them happen. So if that sounds awesome, please go for it. Do yourself a favor, jump on a strategy session with me. We'll talk about what it will take to get you there. If you qualify and you want to join our program, that's fantastic. Even if you don't, You'll get a ton of value from that call because you'll be able to really walk through what it takes to craft these kinds of experience. And of course, one of the things that I'll be able to do is provide you with this awesome blueprint on how to craft basically a HAJI KAMAL. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments any questions you have. I'd love to hear them. What are you working on? And also, if you found this very useful or you know somebody who is working on their own interactive story, make sure you share this with them so they can figure out if this is something that they want to get really good at and maybe craft their own experience as well. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll speak to you soon.